The soft hum of sterilization drones pulsed through the clinic, a rhythmic background to the orderly world Dr. Vexall had built. Here, among the sanitized air and diagnostic scanners, there was a certain predictability. Sick creatures arrived, they were treated, and they left. Simple, logical, a system that worked. That order shattered when the doors banged open with a force that sent the gelatinous receptionist recoiling into itself. 3 station security officers stumbled inside, half carrying, half dragging a body between them. The scent of iron and sweat hit the air, thick and foreign. Dr. Vexall's secondary eyelids flickered in discomfort. The form they carried was unmistakable: elongated limbs, bipedal stance, pale skin streaked with dirt and dried blood. A human. Vexall stiffened. Absolutely not. One of the officers, a reptilian Crevathy, turned toward him with exasperation. It's dying? Then take it to its own kind. Vexall snapped. There isn't time, the officer countered. The human medical station is on the far side of the sector. We found this one collapsed near docking Bay 17. It was being pursued. Vexall's mandibles clicked sharply. By whom? Unknown. No identification, no records. But we know what happens to wounded creatures left untended. The officer's slit-pupiled eyes bore into him. It won't survive the weight. Survival. That word carried weight. It was why so many creatures ended up in his care, desperate, clinging to life by whatever thread remained. But this was different. He turned his gaze back to the unconscious figure. The human's chest rose and fell in erratic, shallow breaths. Its right arm had been crudely wrapped in a strip of torn fabric, stained through with dark red. The wound beneath was deep, dangerously close to the muscle. Other bruises lined its jaw and ribs, signs of recent trauma. Apex predators, the records called them. The dominant species of a death world. A creature whose evolutionary success had come not from natural weapons, but from intelligence, adaptability, and an unnerving capacity for violence. They were feared across the galaxy, not for their strength alone, but for the relentless will that drove them to survive at any cost. Dr. Vexall refused to be responsible for what happened if that survival instinct awoke here in his clinic. I don't treat predators, he said, his voice final. One of the junior technicians, a wiry Avaxi with bright, flickering feathers, shifted uneasily. Doctor, it's injured. And when it's no longer injured? Vexall asked sharply. What then? Do you know what a cornered predator does when it regains its strength? Do you know how many species have seen their ecosystems destroyed because of these things? He gestured toward the unconscious human. This is not some docile herbivore. It is dangerous by design. The security officer exhaled, frustration clear in the flick of his tail. It doesn't matter what it is. It needs help. Before Vexall could retort, another voice cut through the tension. Then I'll help it. Dr. Emily Carter stepped forward, her movements quick and assured. The only human on the station's medical staff, she was an anomaly in her own right, choosing to work among aliens who viewed her species with a mix of suspicion and intrigue. She pushed past the officers and knelt beside the wounded figure, scanning the injuries with practiced efficiency. This human is dehydrated, malnourished, and in shock, she said, her voice steady. The wound on the arm is deep, but not fatal. If it doesn't receive treatment soon, however, the risk of infection is high. It needs fluids, stabilizers, and proper stitching. Vexall crossed his upper arms. Then take it to your own medical facilities. There's no time, she shot back. You have the equipment here. The expertise. I've seen you perform surgeries on creatures twice as deadly as this. That's different. Why? She stood, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Because it's human? Vexall's mandibles twitched in irritation. Because it is unpredictable. Emily exhaled slowly, composing herself. It's not unpredictable. It's scared. She gestured toward the unconscious figure. Look at it. This isn't the face of a predator on the hunt. This is someone who has been running, hurt, desperate. Her voice softened. You say humans are dangerous. Fine. Maybe we are. But we're also capable of trust, of cooperation. She hesitated, then added, and of being afraid. Silence stretched between them. Dr. Vexall glanced at his staff. Unease flickered through them. Hesitation, uncertainty. The Avaxi technician fidgeted, talons clicking against the floor. The receptionist's gelatinous form shifted anxiously. They were waiting for his decision. He turned back to the unconscious human. The slow, unsteady rise and fall of its chest. The way its fingers twitched, as if grasping for something unseen. Even in unconsciousness, it clung to survival. Perhaps that was what unsettled him most. "Fine," he said at last, voice clipped. "But you are responsible for it." Emily didn't hesitate. "Agreed." Vexall signaled to his staff. "Prepare an isolation unit. Double the restraints. I want constant vitals monitored. And if there is the slightest sign of aggression—" "There won't be," Emily interrupted. "Because it's not dangerous." Vexall didn't argue. He simply watched as the human was carefully transferred to a medbay, his clinic now housing the one creature he had sworn never to treat. Apex predator or not, it was here now, and he would find out soon enough whether that had been a mistake. The human stirred before its eyes opened, a slow, pained motion that sent a ripple of tension through the clinic staff. Dr. Vexall stood at the observation terminal, monitoring vitals as the alien medical equipment struggled to translate human physiology into something readable. Heart rate, erratic. Oxygen levels, stabilizing. Neural activity, heightened. The apex predator was waking. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the bedside, her gloved hands steady, her expression calm despite the watchful eyes around her. The human's fingers twitched, its breath hitched, and then eyes. Deep set, sharp, flickering with something ancient and instinctive. The kind of gaze that had once sized up prey across primordial landscapes. The alien staff took a collective step back. The human tensed, its body coiling with the first signs of fight or flight. Its limbs barely moved under the gentle yet firm restraints securing it to the medical table. But even now, injured and weak, it assessed its surroundings with a survivor's precision. A bead of sweat rolled down its temple. Its throat worked, dry and raw, but no sound came. Emily placed a hand on its uninjured shoulder. "Easy," she said softly. "You're safe." Vexall scoffed from the other side of the room. Apex predators do not understand safe. They understand advantage. Leverage. His mandibles twitched in distaste. And right now, it is none. The human's gaze flicked toward him, sharp and assessing. Not panicked, not yet, but wary. Emily exhaled, slowly. "It's not a threat. It is a human," Vexall countered. "That is threat enough." Ignoring him, Emily retrieved a small hydration patch and pressed it gently against the human's forearm. The device hissed as it delivered moisture and electrolytes directly into its system. The human flinched, a barely perceptible motion, then exhaled as the relief of hydration settled in. Its eyelids drooped, exhaustion dragging it back toward unconsciousness. "You think I'm being unreasonable," Vexall said, watching her work. Emily didn't look up. "I think you're being short-sighted." His mandibles clicked in irritation. "History is not short-sighted. Your species is known for destruction. Entire ecosystems lost to human expansion. Species driven to extinction by your unchecked consumption. Your instincts are not built for restraint. And yet, here I am," Emily said, adjusting the vital scanner. "A human, healing instead of harming." She glanced at him then, eyes steady. "Tell me, doctor, if we were nothing but killers, why would any of us choose to save instead of destroy?" Vexall had no answer for that. The human stirred again, its face tightening in discomfort. Emily turned back to it, her touch gentle as she checked the wound along its arm. The gash was deep but clean now, stitched with precision. Alien medical tech had accelerated clotting, but the healing process still required time. Its body twitched, reacting to some distant pain. "Shoo," Emily murmured, pressing a hand lightly against its arm. "You're okay." The human exhaled, and for the first time, some of the tension left its frame. Vexall observed in silence. The predator, this supposed apex of aggression, was responding to touch, to voice, to care. It was strange to witness, stranger still to accept. He had treated countless creatures, some more intelligent than others, some more dangerous. But this was different. His talons drummed against the control panel. It still does not prove anything. Perhaps it is simply too weak to resist. Emily shook her head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't submission. It's trust. Vexol regarded her skeptically. Trust is not an instinct to predators. It is for social creatures, she countered. And humans? We're the most social of them all. She gestured to the unconscious figure. This one didn't grow up alone. Someone taught it language. Someone cared for it when it was small and helpless. That's how we survive, by forming bonds. Vexol exhaled slowly, watching the human's fingers twitch again, as if reaching for something familiar. His mind churned, trying to reconcile what he knew with what he saw. Humans were efficient hunters, yes. Survivors. Strategists. But this was something else. Perhaps, he admitted after a long silence, I have misjudged. Emily offered a tired smile. It happens. The human's breathing evened out, slipping into a steadier rhythm. Healing despite everything. Despite fear, despite pain. And for the first time, Vexol considered that perhaps survival did not always mean conquest. Sometimes it simply meant holding on until someone reached out a hand to help. The human's breathing had stabilized by the time Dr. Vexol returned to the clinic's main chamber. The overhead lights hummed softly, casting elongated shadows along the sterile floor. His staff moved with subdued efficiency, still shaken by the presence of the predator in their care. They had whispered among themselves after the initial treatment, their unease tangible, their questions unspoken but heavy in the air. Now, in the quiet aftermath, Vexol found himself standing at the observation terminal, watching the human through the transparent partition. It was still unconscious, its body exhausted from both injury and survival. Its fingers twitched occasionally, as if grasping for something unseen. He wondered if humans dreamed like his own kind did, if their minds wandered landscapes familiar and distant in the throes of unconsciousness. Emily Carter stood beside the medical table, arms folded as she observed her patient with quiet patience. She had not left its side since the procedure, a testament to whatever strange bond humans seemed to form with one another. Even now, she rested one hand lightly on the human's uninjured forearm, a steadying presence, as if her touch alone could keep it tethered to this place. Vexol had spent a lifetime categorizing species, measuring them by their instincts, their evolutionary paths, their place within the hierarchy of survival. But now, he found himself faced with something that did not fit within those constraints. Humans were predators, that much was undeniable. Yet here one lay, not as a conqueror, not as a threat, but as something else entirely, wounded, vulnerable, seeking comfort in the presence of its own kind. He exhaled slowly. It is strange. Emily glanced at him, arching an eyebrow. What is? That it responds to care, he admitted. That it does not see its own weakness as something to hide. She studied him for a moment before turning back to the human. It's not weakness, she said softly. It's trust. He mulled over that word, the weight of it. Trust. A fragile concept in a universe where survival often hinged on wariness, on knowing when to strike first. And yet, here was a species that had built entire civilizations upon it. Not just among their own kind, but with creatures beyond themselves, animals, other species, even artificial minds. The clinic's main doors slid open, and the reptilian officer from earlier stepped inside, his gaze shifting immediately to the observation room. Is it stable? Emily nodded. Vitals are holding. The worst is over. The officer's tail flicked thoughtfully. That depends on perspective. Vexol tilted his head. Explain. The officer hesitated before stepping closer. There have been discussions. Word has spread that you treated a human here. Discussions. Vexol repeated, his voice neutral. A good number of the station's inhabitants don't know whether to call it reckless or admirable, the officer said. Most species here have only ever heard of humans from historical accounts, military records, or trade negotiations. Few have ever seen one in such a, he paused, searching for the right word, unthreatening state. Emily exhaled through her nose. So now they don't know what to think. Precisely. The officer's gaze lingered on the unconscious figure. They've seen records of human aggression, but now they've also seen this. And that complicates things. Vexel understood. It was easy to fear what one did not understand. Easy to cast an entire species as a singular force, predictable in its nature, its intentions. But reality was never so simple. He turned to Emily. What will happen to it now? We need to find out who they are, she said. How they ended up here, alone and wounded. Her expression darkened. Someone was chasing them. That doesn't happen without reason. Vexel considered this, then nodded toward the medical table. It will recover. Yes. He studied the unconscious human one last time before exhaling. Then it may be time for the rest of us to reconsider what we think we know. Emily offered a small, knowing smile. It happens. The station beyond the clinic was changing, shifting. Whispers would grow into discussions, discussions into debates. The presence of one human, helpless and wounded, had done more to shake the perception of an entire species than 1,000 reports ever could. The universe was not static. Understanding was not fixed. And perhaps, just perhaps, neither was he.